What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. My name's Kyle. Tonight, it's Thursday evening, July 18th. Hope you guys all are doing well. We're going to be continuing my 32-team projection series. We're wrapping up the AFC South tonight. It's going to be the Tennessee Titans. Excited to talk about them for about 15, 20 minutes here. And if you guys are new to the channel, I've already recorded a bunch of these. We're finishing up the AFC South tonight. That means we're done with 5 divisions, so I have 3 left. I'm trying to get these all done in July so that August we can just focus on fantasy content and live streams and mock drafts and all that good stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of review what they did last year in 2023, and then we'll talk each position for 2024 and their projections. We'll open up my projection document, which you guys can get access to on thefantasyfellowship.com. Just check out the membership content tab. It's about $10 a month, and you guys can see all my projections, my rankings, my stats, and some of the articles that I have in there. So without further ado, we're gonna hop into a screen share here, and let's have fun. All right, so the 2023 Tennessee Titans, 6-11. Of course, we see Mike Vrabel fired, offensive coordinator out. It was just got a little stale there. This was, a team that was defensively minded with the head coaching Mike Vrabel. The offense kind of, once Tannehill kind of fizzled out, this whole offense kind of fizzled out. You also had an aging Derrick Henry. They tried a lot of things, and a lot of things just weren't working. So we need a little bit of a shakeup. But 2023, the team threw about 500 passing attempts, which is pretty low, about 61.5% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, about 7.11 yards per attempt, only 14 passing touchdowns in 2023. That's a problem. 11 interceptions. They ran the ball fine, 444 rushing attempts, about 1,800 yards, 4.16 yards per carry, and 16 touchdowns. These were all lows in the Mike Vrabel era. 444 rushing attempts was the lowest. I guess the next lowest was 445. But in every of the other 5 seasons, Vrabel's team ran for well over 2,000 yards. And this was also the lowest yards per carry that they had, tied for the lowest amount of rushing touchdowns. And a lot of that, it does have to do with Derrick Henry getting up there in age, but it also has to deal with the issues they had at quarterback last year. It has to do just with the lack of depth on the offensive line, and just the overall offensive struggles last year finally caught up to them. So not a great offense last year. We did see Will Levis play a little bit, which was nice, 58% completion percentage, 1,800 yards, a decent 7.09 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. I like that ratio. And then he did run the ball just a little bit. He had 25 rushing attempts for 57 yards. The issue, though, it's clearly that percentage, the 58.43 is pretty bad. But if you look at who he was throwing the ball to, you still have DeAndre Hopkins there, but outside of that, they just didn't have anybody else to throw the ball to. I think Okonkwo is fine as a check down tight end, but no receiver 2 or 3. Chris Moore, Nick Westbrook-Akina, Traylon Burks was not healthy at all last year. Kyle Phillips, they really struggled to find anybody else to throw the ball to besides DeAndre Hopkins. And Will Levis, he had the highest average depth of target last year among quarterbacks. I think it was 10 or 11 yards per attempt, which is pretty nuts. And they just didn't have the personnel to take advantage of a lot of his deep throws. So he was just chucking the ball deep a lot and coming up empty. So, otherwise, Derrick Henry ran the ball fine, 288 rushing attempts, about 1,100 yards, 4.17 yards per carry, and still 12 rushing touchdowns. I thought Pollard Spears was a bright spot, actually a really bright spot, and I expect him to improve that this year. 450 rushing yards last year, 2 touchdowns, and a really good receiver, 52 receptions, 70 targets, 385 yards, and a touchdown. So more to expect from him in year 2. But then, only DHop and Okonkwo were pieces of last year's offense. They're going to still be pieces of this year's offense. So they upgraded that. And, as far as a 2023 review, this team bottomed out in 2023, and I'm excited to have a new system, new players, new faces. We're going to get a new style of Tennessee Titans football that I think is going to be pretty exciting. And I guess before we start with the 2024 stuff, we should talk about Brian Callahan coming over from Cincinnati. The last handful of years, he's been the offensive coordinator there. Let me pull up the numbers. He's been there with Zach Taylor for the last 5 years, and this team throws the ball. They throw the ball almost 600 times per season. They throw for well over 4,000 yards the last 3 seasons, and they don't really run the ball that much. About 400 rushing attempts is kind of where they average out. So it's going to be, again, a different style of offense here in Tennessee. So what to expect? We'll start with Will Levis here, the quarterback. I'm kind of excited about Levis. I think the Titans have done everything right this offseason to give Will Levis enough tools to succeed. They brought in Calvin Ridley. They brought in Tyler Boyd. They brought in Tony Pollard. You have a ton of good receiving weapons here. You have Pollard and Spears at the backfield, DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and then Traylon Burks as the 4, and then Okonkwo at tight end. Like, this is on paper, this is an exciting offensive cast of weapons. So I think Levis is actually going to perform pretty well. I have him at 535 passing attempts, 63.55% completion percentage. That's up over 5 points from his percentage last year. I have him just under 4,000 passing yards. I have his yards per attempt at 7.41, 20 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, and I have him running the ball for about 165 yards and 2 TDs. So not like not a dynamite QB1 at all. I don't think he's going to be there yet. He could surprise and he could do that, but I think he's a solid QB2. He's actually my QB25, and I feel like my baseline numbers are kind of simple with him. I could see him throwing for well over 4,000 yards. I could see him, getting north of 550 to 600 passing attempts. So I'm kind of sandbagging these numbers a little bit just because I want to be balanced with my projection here on this Titans offense. It's the first year with a new coach, second year quarterback, a lot going on here for a young player. But I think Will Levis has the players to succeed with this year that he didn't have last year. And for Superflex leagues, I think you can grab him as your QB3 late in the draft, and you could probably start him and mix him in a little bit. I think he could be this year's version of like a Sam Howell, where you don't know what you're getting every week, but the numbers at the end of the game actually looked okay from from a fantasy lens. So I like Levis. They did bring in Mason Rudolph to be QB2, which I think is fine. He played well in Pittsburgh and led them to the playoffs. He's just going to play a game or two, hopefully not at all, because Will Levis is playing well. So I'm drafting Will Levis in Superflex leagues. I think I'm drafting him in best ball leagues to be my QB2 or 3, and I'm willing to be excited about the Titans this year. But we'll move on to the running backs now, and we have Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Hassan Haskins, Julius Chestnut, and Dylan Johnson, the rookie here. I like this group, man. Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. The offense does not change whether it's Pollard or Spears on the field. And I think that's a huge that's such a good thing for an offense, because when you have different style backs and you can tell if this running back's in, they're going to run the ball, or if this running back's in, they're throwing it on 3rd and 3 or whatever, that kind of stuff. That's situational stuff. For the Titans, it makes it a little bit more tricky for the defense to figure out what they're going to do. I think Tony Pollard's going to lead the team in carries. I think Tajay Spears is going to continue to be the lead receiving back, though. So I have Pollard at 190 rushing attempts, 845 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, about 33 catches, 40 targets, 245 yards, and a touchdown. I think he's going to be a valuable, an RB2 for us. He's not going to light up the scoreboard like he did in Dallas 2 years ago, but he's a full year removed from his foot injury. He could look like that player that we once saw. So he's young enough to do that. I think we want to get excited about the running game here. And then Tajay Spears, I view him more as like a fringe RB2, a guy that you could whip out in a 0 RB build and say, yeah, I just want my 10 points. He's going to be kind of like a Jalen Warren, where he gets, 8 to 10 carries per game, and he's probably going to catch 3, 4, 5 passes per game. So 145 rushing attempts, 655 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 44 receptions, 55 targets, and then 335 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. I actually think that number could be bigger. The receiving numbers could go up. He had 52 receptions last year on 70 targets. So Will Levis can check the ball down. He's willing to throw to Tajay Spears. And I got 95 targets here for the running backs. We had 106 last year. And that's a team that runs the ball, conservative offense. And now we're going to a Brian Callahan offense, which in Cincinnati last year, they threw 64 targets to Joe Mixon. Overall, they had 89 running back targets. The year before that, though, they had 133. The year before that, they had 98. The year before that, they had 102. So I think you're looking at roughly 100 or so targets from the running backs minimum, and that number could go up or down. So I'm feeling a little light on the receptions. If we go and look at where I have these guys ranked among running backs here, I have Tony Pollard, RB29, which feels low. And I have Tajay Spears at RB31. So you can draft both these guys as your RB3, and you might not even need to start them week 1. We can see how this backfield unfolds. I want to put chips of this backfield in because they're just so cheap. And, all it takes is one injury to the other guy before we have a bell cow back potentially. And I think Tajay Spears and Tony Pollard are both very good running backs. So I'm drafting both. I'd like to, if Tony Pollard falls and I can click on him, I'll do that. Otherwise, Tajay Spears is a little bit cheaper. But honestly, like there's best ball drafts that I'm in, and Tajay Spears goes ahead of Tony Pollard. So got to play it out. I think both guys are targets, though. We'll move on to the wide receivers next. We're talking DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks, and then Kyle Phillips, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. I like the top three. I think DeAndre Hopkins is still the leading receiver on this team. 70 receptions, 120 targets, 915 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Last year, he hit 1,000 yards, 75 catches, 137 targets. I think his targets come down a little bit just because there's Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd. There's better other options there this year. But I still think he's going to lead. He's going to be the guy that, when the bullets are flying, that's who Levis is looking for on a third down. I like Calvin Ridley in this offense. I think Will Levis is a good deep ball thrower. Calvin Ridley runs really good deep ball routes. So I think that connection is going to be – that's what they were missing last year. They were missing this field stretcher guy that can take the ball deep and beat the safety. So 65 catches, 115 targets, 955 yards, which actually leads the team in yards, and then 5 receiving touchdowns as well. I think this is a really strong fit for Calvin Ridley, and it really complements what Will Levis can do. He's got his check down in Spears or Pollard, and he's got good receivers in Hopkins and Tyler Boyd that can still get open. Okonkwo can get open, and then Calvin Ridley deep. I think Tyler Boyd's kind of sneaky. He's just going to be a guy that could rack up 4 or 5 catches in any given game, 58 receptions, 90 targets, 645 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And he's going to be on the field a lot. This team's going to run a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. The Bengals that's been their base formation for the last 5 seasons. So we're going to see a lot. And that's what's nice, too, is he's with his old offensive coordinator. So I think Tyler Boyd, bit of a sneaky guy there. He could be of use in redraft leagues early in the year. We'll see about Treylon Burks. I think he could get traded. I want to see him in training camp. If anything happens, though, to Hopkins, Ridley, or Boyd, and we see Treylon Burks enter the lineup, like maybe we'll talk about him on the waiver wire, and then I just don't care about Phillips and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. If we go and see where I have the wide receivers ranked, I have DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver 36, so a fringe wide receiver 3, a guy that you could probably leave in there as your number 3 or your flex. I do have Calvin Ridley right there at wide receiver 42. He's more of a flex wide receiver 4 kind of play. And then if you go down the farther on the list, we do have where is Tyler Boyd at wide receiver 70. So maybe just like a guy you put on the end of your draft or end of your redraft bench. But then we'll finish up with the tight ends. I think it's all Okonkwo. They do have a second-year Josh Wiley and blocking tight end Nick Vannett. But Okonkwo has been kind of the starter there the last couple of years. He had 54 catches last year, 32 the year before. He kind of regressed last year. He wasn't a big play tight end as he was as a rookie, but he proved to be reliable. I think he's a capable tight end. Don't think he's a guy that you want to draft as your tight end 1, but definitely interested, if you go 0 tight end and you want to grab, Luke Musgrave and Okonkwo and see how it goes. I think he can operate, as a guy on your bench as your tight end 2. I still am interested in him for dynasty leagues, but just with the addition of Ridley and Boyd, that kind of pushes him back a little bit in the pecking order. But, we've seen tight ends be successful in Cincinnati too. So like there should be a lot of targets to go around. He could be a nice tight end too, especially in best ball format. So I have him at 50 catches, 75 targets, 555 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And we'll continue to watch the growth and development there of Josh Wiley. Let me see where I have Okonkwo coming in at the tight ends. I have him at tight end 21. So a useful guy, a guy if you have an injured tight end or if he's on the waiver wire, I'm interested in grabbing Okonkwo. But that's it. That's the 2024 Tennessee Titans projections. I'm cautiously optimistic, man. I think this whole AFC South, as I do these reviews, probably the first division where I'm like excited about every team. And I think it's clear the Titans are the worst team in the AFC South. They have a lot of moving parts and new things going on. But I can see the plan, and the plan on paper looks pretty good. I think I'm excited about the trajectory, just the new style of offense that they're going to be playing. And if Will Levis is actually good, like if we see a year 2 jump, like this could really work out well for the team. And then I believe they drafted the offensive lineman in the first round. So I like what they did. I think they're on the right path finally. And excited to draft Tennessee Titans on offense. That's the first time we've been able to say that for a while. So draft the guys. I think we kind of laid out the plan for you guys, and I'm not afraid to target Titans this year. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Curious if you guys are interested in anybody that we talked about today. And dang, the AFC South is done. We'll move on to the NFC South. starting this weekend. And I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for hanging out. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you guys are new. We'll see you next time. Peace.